Welcome to week 76, count it, week 76 of Shark Sports Radio. Alongside of me is Andrew Gifford. He goes by Giffy. It's yours truly, Mark Loisdale Jr., a.k.a. Shark, right here in the Ocean State. We are also joined by another guest for our segment, Page Turners, where we have the writer come on, join us for the pod, talk about the latest book and other books that they've written and the impact it has on the sports world. So thank you all for taking a dive in the tank with us tonight. As always, check us out using your Apple Podcast, SoundCloud, and or Spotify app. Please also look us up on Twitter or X, however you prefer, at SSR34_, YouTube at the Shark Sports Radio channel, and at the Shark Sports Radio Facebook page. So what's on tap tonight? We get into Pace Turners, talk about the Celtics and the Bruins playoffs as they head into round 2. But first, we are greatly appreciated and joined by Jeff Pearlman. Jeff has written 9 books that have appeared on the New York Times bestseller, including Boys Will Be Boys, The Glory Days, and the Party Nights of the Dallas Cowboys Dynasty, Bad Guys Win, Football for a Buck, and many others. Additionally, he has released his new book, The Last Folk Hero, The Life and Myth of Bo Jackson in 2022. So let's make it 10 there, $10 for Jeff, which you can purchase on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and other bookstore outlets. He also wrote the 1999 John Rocker interview in Sports Illustrated. Jeff, how are you tonight?
I'm good, but I have to say, I'm going to take issue with you guys, okay?
That's fine. Right?
Okay. Your Twitter handle is, what is your actual Twitter handle?
SSR34_.
Why so confusing? You have a great show. I was looking for you guys on Twitter. You guys are superstars. You got to be direct, man. You're Shark Sports Radio, damn it. Don't hide.
Yeah, the issue is
that,
I was going to say the issue is the handle's already taken. So for whatever reason, there's a ton of Shark Sports Radios out there.
You know what?
No,
there's only one Shark Sports Radio from the state of Rhode Island, and it's you guys.
I love it.
I love it. Let's clip that and put it in the promo, Mark.
Let's do it.
I love it.
So Jeff, before we get started here talking about the books you produce, I guess what's your process about determining what to write about? You know, do you have any previous relationships with the people, before writing them, or, I guess how did you come up with these ideas?
So for the most part, I'm a nostalgist. Like, I like writing about stuff that brings back old feelings to me. My first book was about the 86 Mets. I was 13 years old during much of that season, and growing up in New York and loved the Mets, and that meant something to me. 90s Dallas Cowboys, nostalgic. Walter Payton, nostalgic. The USFL, really nostalgic. So even Bo Jackson, nostalgic. So for me, that's the number one thing. It's not if I know most of the people or blah, blah, blah. It's what do I want to write about? What interests me? What conjures up feelings that do something for me? I've written books where I regretted it. Like, I wrote a Roger Clemens biography. I did not enjoy it. I didn't feel nostalgia for Roger Clemens. I cover Roger Clemens. And when you spend 2 years on a book, you better enjoy it and you better get something out of it.
Awesome. Yeah. And that makes sense. I mean, you got to kind of be, obsessed with the topic, right? So that absolutely makes sense. So Jeff, I had Roland Lansby join us on the pod in recent weeks. Mm-hmm. And I asked him the same question I'm going to ask you. I mean, the Gail Goodrich trade, right from the book, with Showtime, between the Utah Jazz and the LA Lakers. I mean, that trade has probably gone down as one of the most climactic trades of all time. How wild of a change for the NBA landscape would that have been if it, reversed the curse?
Well, it's funny you say it, because I don't think most people realize the magnitude of that deal. So you say it goes down as so-and-so and so-and-so. I don't think most people are aware of it, No. So, like, for me, if you really think about it, it's one of the most, like, yeah, it's groundbreaking and it changed sort of everything. But, like, it's like, it just changed everything. It changed everything. It changed the Lakers completely. And Gail Goodrich was a really good player, but Phoenix was getting, basically a has-been by the time they got him. Yeah, it's a game changer. New Orleans, excuse me. It's just a game changer all time.
Yeah. And like, how crazy is it that the number one pick itself, for the draft, obviously drafting Magic Johnson at the time, was decided on a coin flip. I mean, that's just insane. I don't think we've ever seen that in history.
Well, that's the old NBA, and it's actually kind of cool if you think about it. Like, there's this moment where Chicago and the Lakers are wondering what their future beholds. And, the number 2 pick in that draft was David Greenwood from UCLA. So think about the difference between taking Magic Johnson, a generational player, and not just a generational player, but a guy who really changed the way people perceive the NBA, or you get David Greenwood, which would be the equivalent of getting modern day. It'd be like getting RJ Barrett, where you'd be like, oh, that's a good, he'll help us. But, as opposed to getting Anthony Edwards, that's basically the level of, yes.
That's funny how they did the coin flip. Like today, like if that ever happened, like ESPN would have gotten an hour on it. They would have had Jim Gray host, and it just would have been this like giant thing that they just would have built up until like the end. So it's crazy that like like just the history of 2 franchises basically just like it's just a flip of the coin. Before we get into the more about the books and your pieces, I wanted to talk a little bit about your podcast, our 2 writers, Sling and Yank, which you can find on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and wherever else you pick up your podcast. Like, what made you create the podcast? And for those people that don't know, like, Jeff has other authors and writers come on to talk about their history of covering sports and what have you. So usually when you kind of think of podcasts, like it's about either entertainers or athletes or so on and so forth. But what made you want to kind of focus the podcast on authors and having them tell their stories?
Well, I just love writing. Like, I really do. I mean, I hate it. Like, it's torture. And like I told you guys, I'm working on a Tupac book, and, I just spent 8 hours in a coffee shop and I probably wrote 30 words, like, it's like, it can be like gun to your head harsh, but I also think it's joyful and it's collaborative. And when you talk to other writers, and you hear their pain and you hear what they go through, the highs and the lows and the loneliness and the isolation. For me, it's just therapeutic more than anything. Like, I've never made $1 off my podcast. I've had it for 7 years. I've never made $1 off of it. I have a sponsor who sends me a shirt every now and then. Like, I'm not trying to get rich off of it. To me, it's just awesome to talk writing with people and meet new writers. So it's really self-indulgent. It's just me really liking talking about writing.
Almost like you said, it's therapeutic. It's like a therapy session between writers as well. And also too, like, and for people to know like the grind that you guys go through, because like everybody sees the final product, right? They see the book, they see the articles, so on and so forth. But I think when people are reading it, like, it's hard for them because they're enveloped in the story. Like, it's hard for them to know the absolute grind, like you said, love-hate relationship that you guys go through. Like, I can't imagine, but that's I listened a little bit to the one. I'm an MMA fan, so I listened to one with Ariel Hawani, which was awesome.
He's awesome.
Yeah, Ariel, big fan of his. But also wanted to cover, so we're coming up here on the 25th anniversary of your John Rocker article in 1999. And as we were doing research for this podcast, and I was telling Mark before you hopped on, when he said that you were coming on, and I went on your website and I started doing the stuff, it just kind of hit me. You know how you have those kind of articles and sports things that happen that just kind of linger with you?
Sure.
I'm at my desk at work and I was like, did he do the Rocker article? So I went through the SI like database and I was like, oh my God, he did the Rocker article. Oh my gosh, I have to ask him about it. So, I mean, what was that like? Because you read what you wrote and his answers, and A, what was that experience like? And B, did you expect when you wrote that for like the mushroom cloud that happened after that with the comments and just it's a very incendiary article with his opinions on everything. What was the experience like? And as you were writing it, did you think like, oh, this is probably going to be a big deal?
So to answer in reverse order, I had no idea. I was pretty naive. I was 27, which is still kind of young as a writer. And I'd never really had a sort of it story before. And it story being a story that kind of goes national and people are talking about. I didn't know it. I remember I was in the Sports Illustrated offices, and another writer was there named Steve Rushin, a really great writer. And I said to him, do you think the AP Wire is going to pick this story up? And he's like, you have no idea how big this is going to be. And I was like, I don't know. and it blew up. It was a weird experience, like I basically I drove around with him for, I don't know, 6 hours in Georgia. He knew I was taping it. I was taping it. He knew I had a notepad out. He knew I was there from Sports Illustrated. He knew I was like a guy from New York. He probably knew I was Jewish. I don't know, whatever. All these things, right? I think he was showing off in a lot of ways. I think in a way this was him peacocking, and thinking I'm really gonna. This is, I'm the man and blah blah blah. And he was just gross. Like, he was gross, and I didn't agree with anything he said, almost about anything. Like, I certainly social issues, I agreed with zero. He said maybe there's some baseball things, but like, he clearly didn't like foreigners. Didn't have much good to say about black people. Didn't blah blah blah, on and on and on. But the thing that's very interesting about being a journalist, or one of the things, it's not your job to debate the person you're sitting with. Like, my job was not to sit there and say to John Rocker, well, blah blah blah. I have a lot of good friends who are blank. Like, that's not my job. You're there to understand who he is and how he feels. So what I did the whole time is listen and record. And I remember when it ended, he dropped me off at the end of the day, and I called my mom. I called my parents, and my mom answered. I was like, I don't know what just happened. This was the craziest thing ever. And it was something, it was, I can still see him getting out of the car, and he had a teammate named Randall Simon. I remember him calling him a fat monkey. And he didn't mean like a cute, adorable something. It was a racial. And I just remember being like, whoa, or like early on when he picked me up, we're driving and there's a car in front of us that's driving kind of erratically. And he starts complaining about Asian women and how they can't drive. And then we pull up and the guy driving the car is white. It was just one weird, and also I'm from New York. That's the other thing I thought was kind of strange, just as far as judgment. I literally flew here from New York City. So when you talk about the queer with AIDS next to the welfare mom, next to so-and-so on the 7 train, these are my people. I'm literally from this area, you dumbass. It just was weird. It was like tone deaf and weird. And honest to God, I've said this for years and I know it's true. I just think he thought in his very simple mind, we're 2 white guys in a car. And I think to him, that meant he could say whatever, and I'm going to sit there and agree with him. And
that's not the case.
He had the wrong white guy in the car with him, I guess. I don't know.
So, just a quick follow-up question. So, when you're in that moment and you're hearing these words come out of his mouth, and you're from New York, and you're hearing about just all of his opinions that are just insane. And you said there that it's your job to listen. At that point, when you're listening to those words and you're recording him, is there any sort of filter or any sort of feeling that you have at that moment that you're like, okay, obviously this is insane what he's saying right now, and I'm recording him? Or are there any kind of like buffers, like almost like a dual sort of purpose? Like, this is crazy, but I also have to open up my brain to be able to listen and be able to put a story together in my head to be able to write and then put, in Sports Illustrated. Like, what's that moment like when you're getting all of that crazy sewage that's coming out of his mouth, but you also have to be clear and present to be able to write the article the best way that you can?
All right, so that's a good question. And something happened a couple of days ago that was interesting. I posted something on Twitter, and I got a ton of really vile emails and DMs from people, like really hardcore anti-Semitic. You effing kike. I hope you effing die. Someone sent me a photo of like ashes and said, here's Jeff Pearlman's relatives, like stuff like that, right? Really vile. And it doesn't affect me one iota. It affects me in that I'll be like, wow, that's crazy, right? It doesn't get me mad. Like, it just doesn't get me mad. I don't know if that's something you develop in journalism or something I have. It just doesn't get me mad. Like, it doesn't affect me. It's not, they don't know me. They're just being assholes. And so I'm sitting there and I'm listening to John Rocker. I'm not mad. Like, I understand he's a moron, and he's not punching me in the face. He's just being a moron. So I guess